As Alice Harper's rigid, aged hands hesitated while pruning her roses, she observed two young black girls approaching her home. The 80-year-old widow watched her heart pound as the twins slowly climbed her front steps. Their short, curly hair bounced with each movement, and their eyes reflected a fear no child should ever experience. Upon reaching the porch, Alice felt her breath catch. The girls gazed up at her, their small faces marked with worry. In whispers barely audible, they uttered words that would disrupt Alice's peaceful life and thrust her into an unexpected nightmare. Before we proceed, share in the comments where you're watching or listening from today, and if you're enjoying this gripping story, don't forget to subscribe. As Alice cared for her cherished garden, the soft hum of bees blended with the rustling leaves. At 80, she found peace in the vibrant hues and sweet scents of her flowers. Each petal and leaf held memories of bygone days, of laughter shared with her late husband, Edward. Carefully pruning a rose bush, her arthritic hands moved with familiar precision. Her thoughts drifted to the past. She recalled when the neighborhood thrived with activity. Children's laughter echoing down the street, neighbors chatting over fences, and the inviting smell of backyard barbecues on warm summer nights. Now the street lay unnervingly quiet. Many of the original families had relocated, leaving their homes either vacant or inhabited by strangers who kept to themselves. Alice remained one of the few connections to the neighborhood's lively past. She paused, wiped her brow with the back of her gardening glove, and looked toward the empty house next door. It had been on the market for months, the stark for sale sign a constant reminder of changing times. She sighed, feeling the weight of her solitude pressing down. Just as she was about to resume her pruning, a sound drew her attention. The distant rumble of an engine grew louder, and Alice's heart raced with anticipation. She watched a large moving truck navigate down the street, its brakes squealing softly as it stopped in front of the vacant house. Her curiosity piqued. New neighbors after all this time. A flicker of excitement ignited in her chest, a small spark of hope. Perhaps this was the change the neighborhood needed, a chance to revive some of its former vibrancy. As she observed, attempting to appear busy with her gardening, Alice's mind buzzed with possibilities. Could they be a young family bringing children's laughter back to the street? Or maybe a retired couple, potential companions for afternoon teas and shared stories? Anticipation built as she awaited the first glimpse of her new neighbors. She hoped for friendly faces, people who might infuse her quiet community with life. Watching with barely hidden interest, Alice saw a woman in her early 30s step out from the passenger side of the truck. Her rich ebony skin contrasted beautifully with her vibrant yellow sundress. The woman's face showed a mix of excitement and apprehension as she took in her new surroundings. Close behind her were two little girls, their matching braids bouncing as they hopped down from the truck. They seemed to be around 6 years old, their striking resemblance indicating they were twins. Their eyes gleamed with curiosity as they surveyed the unfamiliar neighborhood. Alice's heart warmed at the sight of the children. It had been so long since young voices had filled the air on their street. She smiled, already imagining the energy these little ones might bring to the neighborhood. Just as Alice was about to wave a welcoming hand, movement from the truck's driver's side caught her eye. A white man, appearing to be in his late 30s or early 40s, stepped out. He stretched his muscular arms, flexing as he scrutinized the house and the neighborhood with a critical eye. Alice's brow slightly furrowed in confusion. The scene didn't quite match her initial assumptions. She had expected the man to be the woman's husband and the girl's father, but their contrasting appearances gave her pause. Maybe he's a new boyfriend, Alice thought, crafting a story in her mind. Perhaps she's recently divorced and they're starting fresh together. It wasn't uncommon these days, she reasoned, though a lingering unease persisted. As if aware of Alice's gaze, the woman turned, and their eyes met. A warm smile spread across the newcomer's face, and Alice felt an instant connection. She raised her hand in a friendly wave, her own smile broadening in response. The moment was brief, yet meaningful. In that simple exchange, Alice felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this new family would bring much-needed life and warmth back to the neighborhood. The moving truck, displaying the logo of a local company, drove away after unloading only a few suitcases. It struck Alice as odd. New residents usually arrived with trucks full of furniture and boxes. This family seemed genuinely starting anew, with very little to their name. As much as Alice wanted to walk over and introduce herself immediately, she held back. They'll need time to settle in, she thought, deciding to give them space. There'll be plenty of time for welcomes and introductions later. With a blend of excitement and curiosity, Alice returned to her gardening, her mind occupied with thoughts of her new neighbors. She looked forward to the possibility of new friendships and the return of a sense of community to her quiet street. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Alice gathered her gardening tools and went inside. She cast one last glance at the house next door, where the new family had vanished. Inside, the curtains were drawn, and no sounds emanated. Alice couldn't shake the feeling that something was slightly off, but she dismissed the thought. "Don't be silly," she scolded herself. "They're probably just tired from the move." With that, she closed her own door, looking forward to what the coming days might bring. As evening settled over the neighborhood, Alice found comfort in her cozy living room, embraced by her nightly routine. The soft glow of the television mingled with the warm flicker of the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In her hands, she held a delicate china teacup, steam rising gently from her favorite chamomile blend. This quiet moment had once been a cherished routine shared with Edward, her late husband. Now it served as both solace and a poignant reminder of his absence. Alice's eyes drifted to the empty armchair across from her, almost able to see Edward's kind smile and hear his gentle chuckle as they discussed their day. The house creaked softly, settling into the night, and Alice pulled her cardigan closer around her shoulders. She focused on the television, where a nature documentary showcased the serene beauty of a distant rainforest. The narrator's soothing voice and tranquil scenes helped ease the loneliness that often crept in during these quiet evening hours. Just as Alice began to feel drowsy, lulled by the fire's warmth and the calming tea, a sudden, sharp sound jolted her to alertness. A loud bang, like something heavy falling or a door being slammed forcefully, echoed through the night. It seemed to come from the direction of her new neighbor's house. Alice sat up straight, her heart racing. The bang was followed by what sounded like muffled screams, high-pitched and distressed. She strained her ears, trying to determine if she had truly heard cries or if it was just her imagination. Silence fell again, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire and the low murmur of the television. Alice remained still, her tea forgotten as she listened intently for any further sounds. Minutes passed, but nothing else disturbed the night's quiet. "Perhaps they're just settling in," Alice reasoned, attempting to calm her racing thoughts. Moving can be stressful, especially with young children. Maybe one of the girls had a tantrum or knocked something over. Yet, despite her efforts to rationalize the disturbance, a gnawing unease settled in her stomach. The sound had been too sharp, too violent for a simple accident. And those screams? Alice shuddered, unable to dismiss the fear she thought she had heard. She considered going next door to check on the family but hesitated. It was late, and she didn't want to seem nosy or intrusive. After all, she barely knew them. "I'm probably overreacting," she told herself, trying to shake off the discomfort. Alice finished her now cold tea and went through the motions of preparing for bed. She turned off the television, stoked the fire, and slowly made her way upstairs. But even as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the unsettled feeling that had taken root. As she drifted off to sleep, Alice made a decision. Tomorrow, she would bake a cake and properly welcome her new neighbors. It was the neighborly thing to do, and perhaps it would put her mind at ease. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the unsettling events of the previous night feeling distant in the cheerful daylight. Alice rose early, determined to set aside her lingering concerns and focus on her plan to welcome the new neighbors. In her kitchen, she busied herself with the familiar routine of baking. She had chosen a classic lemon drizzle cake, a recipe passed down from her mother that always brought smiles to faces. As she mixed and measured, the kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of citrus and vanilla. While the cake baked, Alice tidied herself up, selecting a pretty floral blouse and her favorite cardigan. She wanted to make a good impression on the new family, hoping to foster a friendly relationship that might bring some life back into her quiet days. Carefully frosting the cooled cake, Alice rehearsed what she might say. She was eager to invite them over for coffee, to learn more about them, and make them feel welcome in the neighborhood. Perhaps the little girls would like to see her garden, or she could offer some local knowledge to help the family settle in. With the cake boxed and a warm smile on her face, Alice headed next door. She noticed that the curtains were still drawn and the house seemed eerily quiet for a home with two young children. Pushing aside a flicker of apprehension, she rang the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened, and Alice found herself face to face with Jasmine, the woman she had seen the day before. Up close, Alice could see the warmth in Jasmine's dark eyes, though there was also a hint of something else, perhaps wariness or fatigue. "Good morning," Alice said brightly, holding out the cake. "I'm Alice, your neighbor from next door. I thought I'd welcome you to the neighborhood with a little homemade treat." Jasmine's face lit up with a genuine smile, the wariness fading. "Oh, that's so kind of you. I'm Jasmine. It's lovely to meet you properly." As Jasmine reached out to accept the cake, Alice noticed a flicker of movement behind her. Before she could say anything more, the man she had seen the day before appeared in the doorway, immediately changing the atmosphere. "Who is it, Jasmine?" he asked, his tone brusque and his eyes narrowing as they landed on Alice. Jasmine's smile faltered slightly. "This is Alice, our neighbor. She's brought us a welcome cake." The man, Brian, Alice would learn, stepped forward, effectively blocking Jasmine from view. "I'm Brian, Jasmine's boyfriend," he said, his voice curt and unwelcoming. "Thanks for the cake, but we're pretty busy today. Lots of unpacking to do, you know." Alice felt her heart sink at his dismissive tone. "Oh, of course I understand," she replied, trying to maintain her friendly demeanor. "I just wanted to invite you all over for coffee sometime when you're settled. It would be lovely to get to know you better." Brian's posture stiffened, and he kept the door partially closed, as if trying to hide the interior of the house from view. "That's not necessary," he said flatly. "We're private people. We'll let you know if we need anything." From behind Brian, Alice caught a glimpse of Jasmine's face. The warmth had been replaced by a look of resigned disappointment, and she mouthed a silent "thank you" to Alice. Before Alice could say anything more, Brian took the cake box and began to close the door. "Thanks again for the cake. Have a good day," he said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. The door shut with finality, leaving Alice standing on the porch, feeling bewildered and slightly hurt. She had encountered reserved neighbors before, but something about this interaction felt off. Brian's abrupt manner, the way he had dismissed Jasmine's evident friendliness, and the guarded way he positioned himself in the doorway all contributed to a growing sense of unease in Alice's mind. As she walked back to her own house, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong next door. The warmth and excitement she had felt about new neighbors were quickly being replaced by concern and a nagging worry. Alice spent the rest of the morning putting around her house, trying to distract herself from her thoughts, but her mind kept returning to the strange interaction, to Jasmine's silenced warmth, and to the muffled sounds she had heard the night before. "Perhaps I'm just being a nosy old woman," she told herself, but deep down Alice knew her instincts were rarely wrong. Something wasn't right in that house, and she couldn't help but wonder what might be happening behind those drawn curtains. As the afternoon sun began to set, Alice found herself absently watering her collection of indoor plants. The familiar task usually brought her comfort, but today her mind was elsewhere, still pondering the odd encounter with her new neighbors. She moved from plant to plant, her weathered hands gently tilting the watering can when a flicker of movement outside caught her eye. Alice paused, peering out the window, and her heart skipped a beat at what she saw. The two little girls from next door, the twins she had seen the day before, were making their way across the lawn toward her house. Their movements were furtive, hunched slightly as if trying to make themselves smaller. Every few steps they glanced back at their own house, their little faces pinched with worry. Alice's brow furrowed with concern. This didn't look like the carefree exploration of children in a new neighborhood. There was an urgency, a fear in their movements that set alarm bells ringing in Alice's mind. Setting down her watering can, Alice walked to the front door. She opened it just as the girls reached her porch, their wide eyes looking up at her with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Hello, dears," Alice said softly, crouching down to their level despite her aging knees protesting. "Is everything all right?" The girls exchanged a nervous glance, and Alice's heart clenched at the fear she saw in their young faces. After a moment of hesitation, one of the twins leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our new daddy doesn't like us." The words struck Alice like a physical blow. She felt the color drain from her face as she processed what the child had said. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" she asked gently, striving to keep her voice calm. But before either girl could respond, a booming voice shattered the moment. "Girls, what do you think you're doing? Get back here right now." Alice looked up to see Brian striding across the lawn, his face a mask of barely contained anger. The twins flinched at the sound of his voice, their little bodies tensing with fear. "I'm so sorry," one of the girls whispered hurriedly. "We have to go." With one last pleading look at Alice, the twins turned and scurried back toward their house. Brian met them halfway, grabbing each by the arm and practically dragging them back inside. Alice stood frozen on her porch, her heart pounding. The girls' words echoed in her mind, along with the image of their frightened faces. She watched helplessly as Brian ushered the twins inside, slamming the door behind them with such force that she could hear it even from across the yard. For several long moments, Alice remained rooted to the spot, her mind reeling from what she had just witnessed. The peaceful afternoon had descended into something dark and unsettling, leaving her with a profound sense of dread. As the sound of the slammed door faded, Alice slowly made her way back inside her home. Her hands shook as she lowered herself into her favorite armchair, the weight of what she had just seen settling heavily upon her shoulders. "Our new daddy doesn't like us." The little girl's whispered words played repeatedly in Alice's mind, each time sending a fresh wave of concern through her. She couldn't shake the image of the twins' frightened faces, nor the aggressive manner in which Brian had handled them. Alice's thoughts raced as she tried to comprehend the situation. Was she overreacting? Perhaps Brian was just strict and the girls were exaggerating, as children sometimes do. But deep down, she knew this was more than that. The fear in those young eyes was real, speaking of something far more sinister than mere strictness. As the minutes ticked by, Alice found herself caught in an internal struggle. Should she intervene? It wasn't her place to meddle in another family's affairs, was it? But then again, if something truly was wrong, could she live with herself if she did nothing? She thought of Jasmine's silenced warmth during their brief interaction, of the muffled screams she had heard the night before, and of Brian's overly controlling behavior. Each piece of the puzzle, when viewed alone, could be explained away, but together they painted a disturbing picture that Alice couldn't ignore. What would Edward do? She asked aloud, seeking guidance from her late husband's memory. She could almost hear his gentle voice, urging her to trust her instincts, to err on the side of caution when it came to the welfare of children. With trembling hands, Alice reached for the phone on the side table. Her fingers hovered over the keypad as doubt crept in once more. What if she was wrong? What if she caused trouble for an innocent family? But then she remembered the twins' pleading looks, their hunched shoulders as they tried to make themselves small and invisible. No child should ever have to feel that way in their own home. Taking a deep breath, Alice dialed. As the phone rang, she silently prayed she was doing the right thing. "What's your emergency?" The operator's calm voice came through the line. Alice's voice quivered as she began to speak. I'm not sure if this is an emergency, but I'm very concerned about my new neighbors, especially the children. Can you tell me more about what's concerning you, ma'am? The operator asked patiently. Slowly, Alice recounted everything she had observed over the past day and a half. She described the disturbing noises she'd heard, Brian's aggressive behavior, and, most importantly, her interaction with the twins. The little girl told me their new daddy doesn't like them, Alice explained, her voice catching. The operator listened attentively, asking clarifying questions occasionally. When Alice finished, there was a brief pause. "Thank you for reporting this, ma'am," the operator said, her tone serious. "We take reports of potential child endangerment very seriously. I'm going to dispatch officers to your location to investigate. Can you provide me with your address and the address of the neighbors in question?" Alice provided the requested information, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She had set something in motion now, something that couldn't be undone. "Officers should be there shortly," the operator assured her. "In the meantime, please don't attempt to intervene yourself. Stay in your home and wait for the police to arrive." After hanging up, Alice sat back in her chair, her heart racing. Had she done the right thing? Only time would tell. But as she thought once more of those frightened little girls, she knew she couldn't have lived with herself if she had chosen to do nothing. Now all she could do was wait and hope that help would arrive in time to make a difference. The wait for the police felt interminable to Alice. She paced her living room, alternating between peering out the window and straining her ears for any sounds from next door. The neighborhood remained eerily quiet, heightening her anxiety. Just as Alice considered calling again, she heard the distant wail of sirens. The sound grew louder, and soon she saw 2 police cruisers turning onto her street, their lights flashing but sirens now silent. Relief washed over Alice as she watched the officers exit their vehicles. There were 4 of them, 2 men and 2 women, all wearing expressions of calm professionalism. They conferred briefly near their cars before 2 approached Alice's house, while the other 2 headed toward the neighbors. A firm knock on her door startled Alice, despite her anticipation. She hurried to answer it, finding herself face to face with a middle-aged male officer and his younger female partner. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the male officer said, his voice kind but authoritative. "I'm Officer Williams, and this is Officer Martinez. We're responding to a call about concerns for your neighbors. Are you the one who contacted us?" Alice nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. "Yes, that's right. I'm Alice Harper. Please come in." She led the officers to her living room where they all sat down. As Officer Williams retrieved his notepad, Officer Martinez's keen eyes scanned the room, absorbing the details of Alice's home. "Mrs. Harper, could you walk us through what led you to contact us today?" Officer Williams asked, his pen poised over the notepad. Taking a deep breath, Alice began to detail the events that had transpired over the past day and a half. She recounted the disturbing noises from the first night, the strange interaction when she attempted to welcome the family with a cake, and ultimately, the alarming encounter with the twins. As she spoke, Alice noticed the officers exchanging looks. They posed clarifying questions, their expressions becoming more serious as she provided additional information. "And you're certain the little girl said, 'Our new daddy doesn't like us?'" Officer Martinez asked, breaking her silence for the first time. Her dark eyes were sharp and focused. Alice nodded firmly. "Yes, those were her exact words. And if you had seen how terrified they looked when that man Brian called them back, I've never seen children so afraid." Officer Williams took a few more notes before closing his notepad. "Thank you, Mrs. Harper. You did the right thing by reaching out to us. We take reports like this very seriously, especially when children are involved." "What happens now?" Alice inquired, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. "We're going to perform a welfare check next door," Officer Martinez explained. "We'll speak with the adults and, if possible, interview the children separately. Our colleagues are already over there," Officer Williams added. "We might need to ask you a few more questions later, Mrs. Harper. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement if necessary?" "Of course," Alice responded without hesitation. "Anything I can do to help those little girls." The officers rose and Alice escorted them to the door. Just as they were about to leave, Officer Martinez turned back to her. "Mrs. Harper, I want to commend you for your attentiveness and willingness to get involved. Many people might have ignored their concerns or convinced themselves it wasn't their business. Your actions today may have made a real difference." A lump formed in Alice's throat at the officer's praise. "I just hope everything turns out all right," she whispered softly. "We'll do everything we can," Officer Williams assured her. "Please stay inside for now. We'll update you when we can." As the officers proceeded next door, Alice closed her door and leaned against it, her heart racing. She sent up a silent prayer for Jasmine and the twins' safety, hoping her worst fears wouldn't be confirmed. From her window, Alice watched the officers approach her neighbor's house. She saw them knock, wait, then knock again more forcefully. The scene felt surreal, like something from a television drama, rather than her quiet suburban street. From her vantage point, Alice observed the front door finally open. Jasmine appeared in the doorway, her body language tense and guarded. Even from a distance, Alice could see Jasmine's eyes darting nervously between the officers and something, or someone, inside the house. The officers spoke to Jasmine for a few moments, maintaining a non-threatening yet firm stance. Alice couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Jasmine nodding, her shoulders slumping slightly as if in resignation. Just as it seemed the officers might be invited inside, Brian's imposing figure emerged behind Jasmine. Even from across the yard, Alice sensed the hostility emanating from him. His face was set in a scowl, his body positioned protectively, or perhaps possessively, behind Jasmine. Alice's heart raced as she watched the tense scene unfold. She saw Brian gesticulating angrily, his voice raised enough that she could hear the angry tone, if not the exact words. The officers remained calm, one speaking in what appeared to be a placating manner while the other kept a watchful eye on Brian's increasingly agitated movements. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only a few minutes, Alice saw one of the officers, the female officer she'd spoken to earlier, gently pull Jasmine aside. Brian made a move as if to follow, but the male officer stepped between them, his stance firm and unyielding. The confrontation at the door continued, with Brian becoming more agitated. His voice rose further, and Alice could now make out fragments of his angry protests. "No right! Private property! Mind your own business!" The male officer remained steadfast, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Brian's growing rage. Alice watched, her hands pressed against the cool glass of her window, as the situation teetered on a knife's edge. Where were the twins, she wondered, her eyes scanning what little she could see of the house's interior. Were they witnessing this confrontation? The thought of those little girls cowering in fear somewhere inside made Alice's heart ache. Suddenly, Brian's voice escalated to a shout. "You can't do this! You have no right to talk to her alone!" Alice gasped as she saw Brian lunge forward, his hand reaching out as if to grab Jasmine. In an instant, the officer's calm facade shattered. The male officer swiftly moved to restrain Brian, while his partner ushered Jasmine further away from the door. The scene erupted into chaos. Brian struggled against the officer, his face contorted with rage. More shouting ensued, and Alice saw the other two officers who had been waiting by the police cruisers rush to assist their colleagues. Amidst the commotion, Alice caught a glimpse of movement in an upstairs window. Two small faces peered out briefly before disappearing. The twins, witnessing the unfolding drama. Alice's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. This was all her fault, wasn't it? She had set this in motion with her phone call. But even as guilt threatened to overwhelm her, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that she had done the right thing. Whatever was happening now was bringing to light something that had been hidden, festering in the shadows. As she watched Brian being forcibly restrained and Jasmine being led away by the female officer, Alice sent up another silent prayer. She prayed for Jasmine's strength, for the twins' safety, and for justice to prevail. The quiet afternoon had erupted into a storm, and Alice knew that nothing would ever be the same again. All she could do now was hope that from this chaos, a better future would emerge for Jasmine and her daughters. Partially hidden by a large rhododendron bush, Jasmine stood with Officer Martinez. Even from a distance, Alice could see the tension in the young woman's posture. Jasmine's arms were tightly wrapped around herself, as if trying to hold herself together. Officer Martinez stood close, her stance protective yet giving Jasmine space. Alice couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw Officer Martinez speaking softly, her expression compassionate. Jasmine shook her head several times, her gaze fixed on the ground. The officer persisted, gently coaxing, and slowly Alice saw Jasmine's resolve begin to crumble. It started with a slight trembling of Jasmine's shoulders. Then, as if a dam had broken, her composure shattered completely. She buried her face in her hands, her body racked with sobs. Officer Martinez placed a comforting hand on Jasmine's arm, speaking words that Alice couldn't hear, but could imagine were filled with reassurance and support. For several minutes, Jasmine cried, years of pent-up emotion pouring out. Alice's heart ached for the young woman, wishing she could offer comfort herself. Eventually, Jasmine's sobs subsided, and she began to speak, her words punctuated by hiccups and sniffles. Though Alice couldn't make out the words, she could see the pain etched on Jasmine's face as she spoke. Officer Martinez listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each passing moment. She asked questions periodically, her notepad now out, jotting down Jasmine's responses. As the conversation continued, Alice saw Jasmine's posture change. The hunched, defensive stance gradually gave way to something straighter, stronger. It was as if each word she spoke was lifting a weight from her shoulders. After what seemed like an eternity, Officer Martinez nodded solemnly and put away her notepad. She placed both hands on Jasmine's shoulders, looking her directly in the eyes as she spoke. Jasmine nodded, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. Just then, a commotion from the front of the house drew their attention. Brian's angry shouts had risen in volume again, and Alice could see him struggling against the officer's hold. Jasmine flinched at the sound, instinctively stepping back. Officer Martinez quickly positioned herself between Jasmine and the source of the noise, her stance protective. She spoke rapidly into her radio, her free hand remaining on Jasmine's arm in a gesture of support. Moments later, 2 more police cruisers arrived on the scene, the sirens piercing the afternoon quiet. Alice watched as additional officers swarmed the area, their presence bringing a sense of order to the chaos. Brian's shouts had devolved into a stream of obscenities, his face contorted with rage as he continued to struggle against the officers restraining him. His eyes darted wildly, seeking escape, but the increased police presence had effectively cut off any chance of flight. One of the newly arrived officers approached, a pair of handcuffs glinting in the afternoon sun. Brian's eyes widened at the sight, his struggles intensifying. "You can't do this," he bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation. "I haven't done anything wrong. This is all a misunderstanding." But his protests fell on deaf ears. With practiced efficiency, the officers secured Brian's wrists behind his back, the click of the handcuffs seeming to echo in the sudden hush that had fallen over the street. As Brian was being restrained, Alice's attention was drawn to movement near the house. Jasmine, accompanied by Officer Martinez, was slowly making her way toward the front yard. Her face was tear-stained but set with a determination that Alice hadn't seen before. Brian's eyes locked onto Jasmine, and his demeanor shifted instantly. "Jasmine, baby, tell them this is all a mistake," he pleaded, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "You know I love you and the girls. We're happy, aren't we? Tell them." Jasmine flinched at his words but stood her ground. Officer Martinez placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, and Jasmine seemed to draw strength from the touch. She lifted her chin and spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "No more lies, Brian. It's over." Brian's face contorted with rage once more. "You ungrateful, he snarled, lunging toward Jasmine. Despite his restraints, the officers holding him tightened their grip, pulling him back. "That's enough," one of the officers said sternly. "You're under arrest for domestic abuse and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the officer continued reading Brian his rights, Alice saw Jasmine sag slightly, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Officer Martinez was there immediately, supporting her and speaking words of encouragement that Alice couldn't hear. The neighbors who had gathered to watch the scene unfold began to murmur among themselves. Alice could see shock and disbelief on their faces, mixed with sympathy as they looked at Jasmine. She wondered how many of them, like her, had sensed that something was wrong but had been too uncertain or afraid to act. As Brian was being led to one of the police cruisers, still shouting protests and threats, Alice's attention was caught by movement at the front door of the house. The twins, looking small and frightened, were being gently ushered out by another officer. Their eyes were wide as they took in the chaotic scene, and they clung to each other's hands tightly. When Jasmine saw her daughters, she broke away from Officer Martinez and rushed to them, dropping to her knees and enveloping them in a fierce embrace. The three clung to each other, their bodies shaking with sobs that were equal parts relief and fear of the unknown future that lay ahead. Alice felt tears welling up in her own eyes as she watched this bittersweet reunion. The family's pain was palpable, but so was the love between mother and daughters. In that moment, Alice knew without a doubt that she had done the right thing by making that call. As Brian was placed in the back of a police cruiser, his angry shouts muffled by the closed door, Alice saw one of the officers approach Jasmine and the twins. The officer spoke gently, explaining that they needed to come to the station to give their statements and ensure their safety. Jasmine nodded, gathering her daughters close as they were led to the vehicle. Just before getting into the car, Jasmine's gaze swept across the gathered neighbors, finally landing on Alice's window. Their eyes met, and Jasmine gave a small, tremulous smile, a smile of gratitude, of acknowledgement, of shared understanding. Alice raised her hand in a small wave, trying to convey all her support and compassion in that simple gesture. As the police cruisers disappeared around the corner, the sirens fading into the distance, an eerie calm settled over the street. The neighbors who had gathered to watch the dramatic scene unfold began to disperse, the hushed conversations creating a low murmur that gradually faded as they returned to their homes. Alice remained at her window, her heart still racing from the intensity of what she had witnessed. She felt drained, both emotionally and physically, as if she had been an active participant in the events rather than a distant observer. Just as she was considering stepping away from the window, movement caught her eye. The police cruiser carrying Jasmine and the twins had returned, pulling up in front of the house. Alice watched as an officer opened the car door and Jasmine emerged, holding tightly to her daughter's hands. The small family stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking lost and uncertain. Jasmine seemed to be steeling herself, taking deep breaths as she gazed at the house that had been both their home and their prison. Suddenly, as if by some unspoken agreement, the two little girls broke free from their mother's grasp. To Alice's surprise and concern, they began running, not toward the house but across the lawn toward her own home. Alice's heart leapt into her throat. Without thinking, she rushed to her front door, flinging it open just as the twins reached her porch. Their little faces were streaked with tears, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "Oh, my dears," Alice breathed, dropping to her knees despite the protest of her aging joints. She opened her arms, and the girls fell into them without hesitation, their small bodies shaking with sobs as she held them close. Alice felt her own eyes welling up with tears. She could feel the trembling of their tiny frames, could sense the relief and fear and confusion all tangled up in their embrace. "You're safe now," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. "You're safe." One of the twins lifted her tear-stained face, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for helping us," she said, her words carrying a weight far beyond her years. Alice's heart shattered and mended all at once. She hugged the girls tighter, wishing she could shield them from all the pain and uncertainty that lay ahead. "You're very brave," she told them softly. "Both of you." Movement in her peripheral vision made Alice look up. Jasmine was making her way across the lawn, her steps hesitant but determined. As she reached the porch, Alice could see the myriad emotions playing across the young woman's face: gratitude, shame, relief, fear. "I'm so sorry," Jasmine began, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say, how to thank you." Alice shook her head, still holding the twins close. "There's no need to thank me," she said gently. "I just did what I hope anyone would do." Jasmine's composure crumbled at these words. She sank to her knees beside Alice and her daughters, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I was so scared," she confessed, her words barely audible. "I didn't know how to get out, how to protect them. I thought no one would believe me." "Oh, my dear," Alice said, reaching out to clasp Jasmine's hand. "You're the brave one. It takes so much courage to speak up, to break free." For a long moment, they remained there on Alice's porch, an unlikely group brought together by circumstance and compassion, the twins nestled between Alice and their mother, their sobs gradually subsiding into hiccups. Jasmine held tightly to Alice's hand, as if drawing strength from the older woman's steady presence. Alice made a silent vow to herself that she would be there for this family in whatever way she could. She might be old, she thought, but she still had love to give, still had the power to make a difference. As if reading her thoughts, Jasmine squeezed her hand. "Thank you," she said again, her voice now steady, "for everything." Alice smiled, her heart full. "We'll get through this together," she promised, in the aftermath of Brian's arrest. Alice's role shifted from concerned neighbor to steadfast supporter of Jasmine and the twins. Her quiet home became a haven for the small family as they began to rebuild their lives. Alice's kitchen table, once a place of solitary meals, now hosted frequent gatherings. Jasmine would often stop by for coffee, finding comfort in Alice's sympathetic ear and wise counsel. The twins, Lily and Rose, grew to love their visits, drawn by Alice's warmth and the sense of safety they felt in her presence. As Jasmine navigated the complex legal proceedings that followed Brian's arrest, Alice stepped in to help with childcare. She watched the girls while Jasmine attended court dates, meetings with lawyers, and counseling sessions. Under Alice's gentle care, the twins slowly began to relax and reveal their true personalities. Alice's support extended beyond emotional comfort. She helped Jasmine wade through the sea of paperwork required for social services and legal aid. Her dining room became a makeshift office, scattered with forms and pamphlets as they worked together to secure the resources Jasmine and the girls needed. The transformation in the small family was gradual but unmistakable. Jasmine's posture straightened, her voice grew stronger, and a spark of determination lit her eyes. The twins, once shy and withdrawn, now filled Alice's home with laughter and the patter of playful feet. During one of their now frequent meals together, Rose paused her fork halfway to her mouth and looked up at Alice with serious eyes. "Are you our guardian angel?" she asked innocently. Alice felt her heart swell with emotion. "Oh, my dear," she replied softly. "I'm just a neighbor who cares." Jasmine reached across the table, grasping Alice's hand. "You're so much more than that," she said, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I don't know how we would have managed without you." As Alice looked around at the faces of her newfound family, she realized that in helping them heal, she had found healing of her own. The loneliness that had plagued her since Edward's passing had been replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. Her quiet life had been transformed into something richer and more rewarding.